Welcome to the video covering Chapter 9, Lesson 1, Ratios and Proportions. This whole chapter will be about proportions and similarity. By the end of this lesson, we should be able to answer how do you set up and solve ratio problems. Let's dig into some vocabulary with a ratio. Ratio is a comparison between two numbers by division. They should always be in simplest form. An example would be this one. The ratio of bats to bees was 3 to 2. Keeping in mind that there are several ways to write a ratio. Using the word to, using a colon but still reading it as 3 to 2, having a fraction, or as a division. We use ratios when we are setting up proportions. A proportion is an equation of two ratios. When we have a proportion equation, we use the form of a ratio that looks like a fraction. So A over B equals C over D, and simply because we cannot have D in the denominator, we cannot have 0 in the denominator, B and D are just not allowed to equal 0. Now, when we have an equation like this, a proportion equation, we solve it using cross multiplication. A times D is a cross product AD, C times B is going to be BC, and whatever that multiplication actually works out to. Notice that those cross products, the results of those cross multiplication, will equal each other, so it will continue to give us an equation to solve. When we are simplifying ratios, we really are just simplifying fractions, and 75 out of 100, some of you might not have any problem recognizing that as being 3/4, but just in case, let me show you a quick screenshot of how to use the graphing calculator to simplify fractions. So you can see here how I use the calculator is I entered in 75 divided by 100, and I got 0.75. In order to turn this answer into a fraction, we use this math button right here, which is underneath alpha. If you hit the math button, the fraction option shows up first thing, and all you should have to do is to hit enter to bring it back to your home screen as wanting a fraction, and then hit enter again so it actually turns it into a fraction. So I always just say you hit math, enter, enter, and it will give you your simplified fraction. Now, with the next example, 24 inches to 3 feet, this is where we really have to pay attention to the same units. Inches and feet are in different units. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the 3 and multiply it by 12 to figure out that that is actually 36 inches. So when we have 24 inches to 3 feet, we actually have 24 inches to 36 inches. And again, you can use your calculator if you wish to simplify this fraction down. I know that they both simplify by 12. They're both evenly divisible by 12, so the answer will be 2/3. So in this case, whatever it may be, like let's say that maybe it's a ribbon where you are taking, maybe you're making some sort of something fabric and you're taking your ribbon and you're kind of like, I don't know, ruffling it up and gluing it on something. But either way, you're trying to get like 24 inches of ruffled ribbon, but that 24 inches of ruffled ribbon actually takes 3 feet of ribbon just to ruffle 24 inches. So this is just an example. So what this ratio, simplified ratio, means is that every 2 inches of space actually has 3 inches of fabric in it. So another 2 inches is 3 inches of ribbon, another 2 inches, another 3 inches of ribbon, or fabric, or whatever it might be that maybe we're folding over or pleating or something like that. So just an example. Finally, for 45 minutes to 2 hours, this is again not in the same units. We have minutes to hours. So I'm going to take the larger unit, which is hours. I'm going to multiply it by 60 to figure out that there are 120 minutes in 2 hours. So my ratio would be 45 minutes to 120 minutes. Okay, and then we're going to need to simplify that. And since the top and bottom both simplify by 15, I know that my answer is going to be 3/8. Again, you can use your calculator for this simplification as I showed already. So this would be 3 minutes and 8 minutes. Okay, and maybe again, an example would be maybe you're editing and creating a video, and 8 minutes of real time video capturing actually edits down to 3 minutes of actually good footage. So this is, again, it's just an example. Every 8 minutes of, or let's say every 3 minutes of footage that you want your video to be actually requires 8 minutes of raw footage, I guess the term would be. Now let's get into solving proportions. We're going to solve using cross multiplication. Sometimes it ends up looking like a shoelace here. We're going to take m times 2. That's going to give me 2m. We're going to take 11 times 4. That's going to give me 44. Please make sure you put an equal sign in between them because the cross products are equal. Then I would divide both sides by 2 to finally find m as 22. So these proportions should technically only be 2 steps long, so where you cross multiply and then divide. But when we get into something like b, the cross multiplication, like this 30 times this 6x plus 4, is going to take some extra steps because it is a distribution. Okay, the 30 is not just being multiplied by 6x. The whole expression 6x plus 4 is in the numerator, so the 30 needs to be multiplied by the entire numerator, which really ends up looking like this when we need the distribution. Of course, let me just finish my shoelace there. And then don't forget the other side of 24 times 35, which is 840. So now I'm going to go through and distribute and simplify. After the steps for simplifying and solving this one, x ends up equaling 4. Go ahead and take a second to try this one on your own. Please keep in mind that we are cross multiplying and that when we have an expression, you really want to make sure that that ends up in parentheses so you can distribute. So go ahead and pause the video. Try to solve this one for x on your own, please. You should have gotten x equals 5 after simplifying and solving. Now, when you have word problems with these proportion equations, generally you will be given 3 numbers and there's some sort of pattern, specifically like 2 labels going on. So 3 numbers, 2 labels, and that's going to be the real hint with these word problems. But this does say to remember to define your variables, write the ratio with what is given, fill in what you know, and then we'll use cross products to solve. So let's look at this one. The ratio of children to adults at a holiday parade is 5 to 2. So I'm going to stop right there. That first sentence tells me that the ratio, again, that's the fraction of children to adults, sorry, let me make that an A, children to adults is 5 to 2. So we're going to follow the order that it says. It says children to adults, so C to A means that it's 5 to 2, so the 5 goes with the children, the 2 goes with the adults. And if you think about this, it is a holiday parade, maybe a Halloween parade or something that where there's going to be more children than there are adults. So hopefully this ratio does make sense. So just to make sure that we do define our variables, I'm going to go over here and say C equals the number of children and A equals the number of adults. And that just covers the writing down what our variables actually represent. But I can't solve this yet because I still have 2 variables and only 2 numbers. But if I keep reading, it says if there are 1,440 adults at the parade, how many children are there? Well, since the 1,440 is adults, I'm going to place it and substitute it in for the A here. And now I have a proportion equation with 1 variable where I can cross multiply and solve for the number of children. So after cross multiplying and solving, I get 3,600. So there are 3,600 children at that parade. Continuing with some word problem examples, the ratio of whiners to complainers. So whiners to complainers was 3 to 5. So putting it just in order, whiners and complainers. And that's just how I'm going to define my variable here at this problem. I'm just going to write W and C above the words. It says 3 to 5. If I keep reading, it says there were 21 people whining. So that means I'm going to take out the W and put in 21, keeping the C there for complainers, and then I will cross multiply and solve. I did cross multiply, though I had to write my work up here because I'm running out of space. 3 times C is 3C, 21 times 5 is 105. Dividing both sides by 3, C equals 35. So there were 35 complainers given this situation. Please go ahead and try the last one on your own. So pause the video to go ahead and set up your equation for 5 cups of flour to make 2 pizzas. So if you need to make 10 pizzas, how much flour do you need? Finishing this problem out, hopefully everyone got 25 for your cups of flour. So I'm gonna go ahead and label that 25 cups of flour. In doing so, I realized I never actually defined my variable. So I'm gonna come up here and put an F above the flour and a P above the pizzas. And that's it for today's lesson about ratios and proportions in the chapter Proportions and Similarities. So how do you set up and solve ratio problems? You write the proportion with the appropriate variables, you cross multiply,